Hi, my name is Lyle Sopel, and I'm a jade and gemstone artist. And today I'm also a marble sculptor, so I wanted to show you what my latest project is. And here it is. It's a polar bear, and it's made out of marble, and it's also got a jade base underneath it, a black jade base with some quartz crystal. And it's not quite done. It's just in the process. So I have it kind of laid in. That's what I call it. I've laid it in and been doing a lot of work with the proportions. So let me just show you how it all is. I've got the eyes drawn in and the nose, and it's going to have an aggressive mouth with teeth and so on. So that's not yet put in there. And here we're going to show some of the detailing in the back portion of it, which is kind of some of the design elements in the piece. You can see that here in the back section, where I've actually put some detailing in for the hairlines and so on. So I'm at the point where I've gone beyond the actual proportions of the piece in the rock, and I'm considering the design work of the body itself and how the surface will look when it's finished. So you're looking at a surface that is just ground and not sanded in any way. So today I'd like to just really talk about how this piece got to this point. How did I go from a drawing or an inspiration to the piece in the block of marble? So to help me demonstrate this, I would like to have Curtis take over the camera work, and I'll show you some of the inspiration that has got me to this point. Come on over on this side here. So when I'm planning a piece like this, I use all kinds of inspiration. I like to use an iPad, and I research the subject as much as possible. Like in this case, I get some photos from the iPad of the different forms that the polar bear might take and see it in all kinds of different ways. So that's kind of the beginning of it, and here I use, I've got a book, one of my favorites, The World of the Polar Bear, and so here's another reference that I would use as an idea for coming up with the form and the gesture and posture of the piece. So I do a lot of research, and I really flood my brain with what this idea of a polar bear might be. So beyond that, I go to drawings. Now in this case, I have a drawing that was done pretty much to scale, or almost to scale. And this is it right here. So in this case, I'm making this piece in particular for a client. They wanted it in a certain gesture, and they like this idea of the quartz crystal being underneath the bear itself. So here I have it drawn in just an idea or a concept way. So they liked it this way, and I've got the okay to go forward with the design as it is here. So the next step for me at this point is to create a model. So what I do is I take a piece of plasticine and model it kind of to the drawing. Now in this case, I don't really care too much about how this looks as in regards to being a finished thing as far as the plasticine model goes. What I'm really concerned about is the proportion of it. So this piece is to be 18 inches long from the nose to the back of the foot. So I make that really clear in the marble block that it's 18 inches in length. So when I produce the clay model, which I'm going to use as a reference right from the beginning of the project, I make this exactly 9 inches long from the nose and to the end of of the foot. So that gives me a half-scale model. So I make the clay model, and I get the proportions the way I want. I use the drawing. I use the reference from the photography and whatever else I can come up with. And then I pinpoint all the critical areas that I need for the shoulder and the proportional measurements. So the next step will be to create a template. Hey, hi Louis, how are you? I see you're online here. Good to see you. So the template's made up of just paper drawing, but what I've done with the paper drawing is I've used these measurements of 18 inches. So I've gone from 18 inches on the paper cutout, and then I've also referenced to the actual proportional measurement points that I like to have here. Now I'll show you in a minute why I've marked these areas on the model, because it's critically important. So you get the drawing on the template, and then you can just line it up to the block. And that's what I do, is cut a square block, whether it's jade or marble or any other kind of material. In this case it was marble. And then I draw that template onto the block. And then I'll just use my saw and cut the area out so I have a silhouette of what this particular piece is going to be. Now, that's straightforward enough, but the problem happens when you start working this piece. Because the marble is so rough, you can't find the exact proportion that you need because of the material. There's no reference point when you're working on it because it's so bulky and out of control as far as a rough form. So you need to find a center point that you can use as a reference. So for me, I use the middle point of the shoulder in this particular thing. So I always like, in animal forms, I always like to use the shoulder as the measuring point. Now, the measuring point is important to use from the inside of the form. You'd never want to measure from the outside to the inside, because if you do, your outside is going to always change, but the inside measurement will never change. So if you draw reference to this at exactly the center point, and then you find that center point here on your creation, then you're able to take measurements from that point forward, like this, as I like to demonstrate. So if I want to measure from here to here, I use this as a center point to the end, rather than trying to find the end of the rough block to the middle. So I always measure from inside to outside, and that gives me a very accurate reference. So I always use a center point to measure out to and down from. So what's aided me a great deal here is to have a scale caliper. Now, this is really great for this method here. So if I want to know what the model is, so here I've got it, I'll show you that's a 1-inch measurement on the end of that scale, or that caliper, and it equates to exactly 2 inches on the other end. So if I want a 1 inch, or if I want to know what's the distance between these 2 points on the half scale model, I just use that, and then I can go straight to here, and I can get a pretty good reference to what it is. So that's my key thing, is to have this center point and use this as a way to measure from the model to the actual piece itself. So I can use that in a lot of different ways. I can reverse this caliper and measure on the outside, like so, from here to here, and then on the other side you can see that I would have this measurement as well. So it gives me a very good reference from the model to the finished piece itself. Now, another way that's really helpful to see where you are in regards to the rough piece and the model is to do a little drawing that is helps with the scale. So I've done one here to demonstrate. Let me just find it. Here it is. So this is 18 inches, and then I marked off 1-inch lines or grid on that, and then I did it again here with a half scale. So it's 9 inches, and I marked every ½ inch. So this is how this will fit. So that works really nicely there, and then the model fits on top. Now you can imagine we have this first, and then this is still a square block. So if you want to know on the square block where your piece is going to fit, then you can use the grid line to see where this model foot will be, and you can see it in reference to the grid lines that you can draw onto the block itself. Another way to find a reference is to use a square. Oops. So you can go straight up from your tabletop, say, if that grid line was on your tabletop, then you can use your square to go straight up from that point, so then you can see that, say, this point goes straight up into the point on the nose, and so you could draw that into the square block. So this is one method. This is one method of laying the drawing into the block. And there's other ways you can use pointing tools, which is a little more complicated, but in this case, I'm really concerned about the proportions when I start. That's really the key thing for me. So if I use a center point that I use as a reference to measure out from to all the areas that I want to know about, then it's really critical, and I'm then assured that I will get this in exactly the same proportion that I've made the model. So at a point where the proportions are in place, where the length is there, and the width, and like say the proportions of the legs are in place, then I go beyond the model, and then I no longer need the model. I'm fine with it. It's served its purpose. It's given me the proportions I want, and I'm okay with going beyond it and then placing it on the base. And from this point, I'll just let my imagination move through this, and so I no longer need any of that process when I'm working on it from this point on. I just want to be with the piece now, and I can see the expression coming in, and I can see that I'm going to get a good character in the face. I have the material there to play around with. I've got the nose and everything in the right place, and the gesture is set. So I'm starting to design the actual form of each leg, and I'm not using any reference for that. I just kind of like to play with how the form might move over the surface, and I'm starting to think about the hairlines and that kind of thing. So this kind of might be where I just let my inspiration move through the piece. And I heard a really great quote the other day from Chuck Jones. Chuck Jones is the guy that invented Bugs Bunny and a lot of other characters. And he said, inspiration is for amateurs, and artists just go to work. So that really sang true to me in a way that inspiration does come to you, but for me, I can't be inspired by just sitting at a desk and drawing. What I really have to do is be involved, and I have to be working and engaged with the process of sculpture to be inspired. And so that's where I'm at this point right now, is I'm really inspired with how the form is looking, and I'm really happy that I got the proportions in the right order, and then I can just be free with the inspiration that I feel about how the form could move. So I'm considering how the base is looking now, whether it's proportion to it, whether the quartz crystal or the black jade is the appropriate thing. So everything's in flux at this point, and I think that's how I like to work, so that it's never a definite thing. I never went directly from the model and copied it so precisely that it had to be exactly that way. So I have a lot of kind of freedom with what I'm doing here in order to really bring life to the piece, and I think that's when it happens. When you're engaged with the piece, after you're comfortable with the proportions, then it can really flow. So I hope that's helpful, and I think that if you have any questions at this point, it would be a great time to ask, and if I've covered everything that you might have wanted to know about this, just let me know. There's more that I can share with you. So the piece is going to have a texture when it's complete, and it will be probably have a hairline texture, but I don't think I'm going to go any further than say just kind of a rough finish, because if you take marble into a polish, it tends to look a little like plastic in my mind. So marble has a great way of looking quite lifelike, and if you take it to a really shiny surface, then it tends to be overdone, I think. So what I'm going to do is use a diamond burr, and I'll put all the hairline in it and kind of draw the hairline texture into it. So that's what I'm thinking about next. This will also have black jade in the toes for the claws, and it'll have black jade in for the tongue and the insert, and I'll have a black jade into the nose and the eyes. So that's all yet to come. And I can show you one more thing here. This is how I did it. This is a die grinder, and on the end of it I've got a 30 grit brazed diamond point on there. Now this really rips marble really nice. It's really aggressive cut, and it gives me a lot of freedom to kind of work the surface and be free with it, like I'm drawing on the surface. So like this material, like finding some of these materials is always a challenge. And if you've followed some of my live Facebook in the last couple of weeks, you know that I was away in Tucson, Arizona. And so I go there every year and visit a lot of the people that come from all over the world to show their gemstones and their collections and what they mined over the preceding year. So I go there and I collect a variety of things. So I like the mineral specimens there, and I'm more known as a jade artist than maybe just a straight gem type sculptor. So the jade comes from northern British Columbia, and it's usually just available through the fall of the year, because it's mined through the summer and then brought down for sale through the fall. And so when that happens, I have to buy enough inventory that I think will last me for the whole year. So it takes a lot of kind of experience to be shopping around for different materials, and I always make sure that I have a lot of variety in my studio, so that when I do have an inspiration, I can feel free to just move right into whatever stone I want, and I have it here. So that's a big part about doing this kind of work too, is that you can't just go to the corner grocery and pick up the stone you want. You have to be able to inventory it or keep it available in your studio. So whenever you have these great ideas, that you can work in it right away, right straight into it. So that's really all I have to say at this point. And so I want to thank all of you for being part of this, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that it was informative for you. And if you have any further questions, feel free to just text me or Facebook me a question, and I'll be happy to answer it. So thanks for joining. Bye for now.